Welcome to Muhammad Arman TV, where we expose the truth, fact-check narratives, and dive into the hidden stories behind major events. Today, we're talking about how mainstream media manipulates the narrative to shape public opinion, a process called manufacturing consent. Now, if that sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory, don't worry. We've got facts, historical examples, and a healthy dose of humor to make sure it all makes sense by the end of this video. Oh, and by the way, I'm not here to tell you what to think, just showing you how the media sometimes does. So what is manufacturing consent? Sounds fancy, right? But in reality, it's a system where the powerful use the media to convince the public to support policies or ideas that, if we were thinking independently, we might not. This concept was popularized by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman in their book Manufacturing Consent. In simple terms, it's a media strategy where the news we see, hear, and read is selectively filtered and shaped to fit the agenda of the powerful. So while you think you're getting neutral reporting, the reality might be more like watching a puppet show where you're being told what to think and why. Who's pulling the strings? Big corporations, governments, advertisers, and whoever holds power. Fun fact, there's a reason major news outlets never seem to challenge the system that supports them. Chomsky and Herman lay out 5 key filters in the media that help manufacture this consent. Let me break it down for you. First up, ownership. Major news outlets are owned by mega corporations, so when they report on events, they have to keep in mind the interests of their owners. If a billionaire media mogul owns a news outlet, do you really think that outlet is going to report negatively on policies that benefit, well, billionaires? I mean, it's like asking a fox to guard the henhouse, right? Filter 2 is advertising. Media outlets make money through ads. They have to keep advertisers happy. Now imagine you're a news outlet and your biggest advertiser is, let's say, a big oil company. Would you really run a full expose on climate change or corporate pollution? Of course not, because that would mean less money rolling in. Next, sourcing. The media relies heavily on official sources like government spokespeople, experts, and corporate PR teams. They control the flow of information, and journalists often become stenographers for power, reporting whatever the official sources give them. Why? Because challenging them would mean losing access, and that's bad for business. Filter 4 is flack. Ever wonder why some journalists avoid certain topics? Well, they don't want to get hit by flack. Flack is any backlash that challenges or criticizes the media. Think about how whistleblowers or independent journalists get attacked for exposing uncomfortable truths. Media organizations want to avoid this negative attention, so they tread carefully. Finally, anti-ideology. There's always an enemy, a group or country that's framed as the villain. Think back to how the media portrayed the Soviet Union during the Cold War, or the way they handle countries like Iran, Venezuela, or Russia today. The media whips up fear and outrage to justify certain policies that often benefit the powers that be. So yeah, the news is like a really well-done magic trick, only instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, they're pulling wool over your eyes. Now, let's move on to some real-world examples of media hypocrisy. You ever notice how certain stories dominate headlines while others barely get mentioned? Or how the same event is covered completely differently depending on the outlet? Let's talk about protests, for instance. When protests happen in countries that the West sees as rivals, like China or Russia, the media paints the protesters as brave heroes standing up to oppression. But when similar protests happen in Western countries, suddenly the narrative shifts. Protesters become troublemakers, violent agitators, or even domestic terrorists. Weird, right? Remember when Julian Assange and Edward Snowden leaked information exposing government surveillance? The media initially celebrated them, then turned around and painted them as traitors or criminals. The irony, right? First, they were defenders of democracy, and then suddenly they're a threat to national security. The hypocrisy is mind-boggling. But hey, we can't be too serious all the time. Here's a fun game. Next time you're watching the news, try to spot the bias. Play media bingo. Does the story use unnamed sources? Is there an official spokesperson repeating the same lines? Is the enemy being demonized? Mark those off your bingo card and see if you win. Add in a humorous visual of a media bingo. card with common media tropes like government source, demonized enemy, heroic narrative, etc. And if you get 5 in a row, congratulations! You're now officially better at spotting media bias than most of the public. To wrap things up, the media plays a crucial role in shaping how we see the world, and sometimes that picture is filtered to serve the interests of the powerful, whether it's through ownership, advertising,